Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Mosry and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Mosry.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Abi Claus, who's the director of Salesforce at Camping World. Welcome, Abi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you
for being here. Abi, we'll start off really nice and easy for you with a simple question. Tell us a little bit about your background in the Salesforce ecosystem, your journey.
Yeah, so I'm Abi Claus, like Santa Claus, and I have been Salesforcing for 13 years. I started out as an accidental admin in 2011, and I've kind of held every role under the Salesforce sun except for hands-on coding. I've done BA, end-user trainer, end-user optimizer, solo admin on a team. I've done project management, program management, and now most recently, director of Salesforce. So I've really grown up in the Salesforce ecosystem. I feel like I've kind of seen it all. I've done consulting, I've done in-house, and I've been around a long time. I'm a co-lead for the Women in Tech user group here in Dallas. I've spoken at Dreamforce. I speak at several conferences a year, regional conferences. Love my Dreamins. Texas Dreamin' was my first. So I'm really big in the ecosystem, both from like best practices and teaching people what to do, what not to do, and, a thought leader in what should we do going forward with the ever-changing landscape. But my handle is Salesforce Abi. So I love me some Salesforce. I drink the Kool-Aid.
and I can definitely be a testament to your presence in the ecosystem, especially local. I always know I'm going to see a familiar face at an event because I know you'll always be there. So, appreciate you always being involved. And, for the people who don't say it, everyone loves you being there. So thank you. So you recently joined Camping World. You've been there about 8 weeks. What did Camping World do? Give us a bit of an overview of what they do as a business for us, please.
Yeah, Camping World is a RV retailer. We sell 1 out of every 4 RVs you see on the road. So we're the largest retailer. Yeah. And we have other products like Good Sam membership, which is kind of like insurance loyalty program. And we actually have a boat arm as well, but I'm not too involved in that just yet. But it's a really, really exciting and growing company who about 10 weeks ago made the decision to move Salesforce from IT under the business in a more product-facing, like more product-centric role. And that's when I heard about that, I was so excited because I feel like that's actually where Salesforce should align and we'll do it, shine the best. So it's a very exciting time.
Was that something that you had taken into account prior to your decision to join the business? Was that the conversation that you knew was taking place prior to joining? And how important is that to you? Because I know it's something you feel passionate about, where Salesforce should sit in a business. So yeah, was that something you were conscious about?
Yes. Yeah, it was. I figured that out during the interview when I interviewed, actually my first interview with who is now my boss. She is the VP of digital strategy. And I was like, digital strategy, is that IT? Like, tell me about that. And she's like, no, it's more of a product. Like, we're products focused. And I got very excited because I was like, okay, you get it. Because Salesforce for my entire career there's been this struggle. Does it sit with IT? Does it sit with the business? And yes, it's technology, but is business technology. The business uses it to run, so it needs to sit and live and breathe and zig and zag with the business, because business doesn't slow down, right? Business isn't going to sit and wait on technology. There are departments Camping World, and I've seen this in other companies I've worked in, that if the technology is too slow, they're going to go find their own next thing, right? And then you've got data silos and process silos, and that's just never good for, your holistic business. You're never going to get your 360, right? Your customer 360 if you're got myriad of different departments and different platforms. So it was definitely a conscious decision. It was something when I hung up for my first interview, I was telling some friends, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, they understand, they get it. They are a product company. They've moved Salesforce into product, realm, which means it gets product support, and it gets, hands, and it gets process mapping, and like all of the things that come with, the product focus. So definitely important to me. And again, that's something that it might be a hill I'm ready to die on, is that Salesforce is a business technology, not an IT technology.
Good. I was pausing for a second there because I thought that was the type of question Maz might have a follow-up on.
Yeah, for sure I do. So in terms of reporting structure of people, are you saying that the people should report up to a business owner, or let's say an operations, a COO, as opposed to a CTO? Let's say the system's owner. So even though they're developers, maybe they're building integrations, maybe you have an e-commerce platform or a website, where are you going to draw the line? I'm going to say our e-commerce platform should be with the business. They're the ones doing the sales. They got to support it. Right. So
it's a good question. And I think every business has to ultimately answer that for itself. But I think having that conversation is important, and not just assuming that it needs to go here or it needs to go there just because of history or, tradition or whatever. I think for Camping World, it does work because there's a whole product arm that, envelops our websites, that envelops, our processes and things that go along with our websites and our other technology, our business technology. And I have reported up through CTOs, and I've reported up through COOs. And honestly, I feel like Salesforce gets the most support, and therefore the best ROI, when it reports up through the COO. I've reported to a CTO, and sometimes they just don't understand it because they're typically not Salesforce people. And so it's kind of, what's the right word? It's kind of dismissed a little bit when it's a serious enterprise technology, right? It's not to be dismissed. It's not just because it's not easy, just because there's a plethora of training doesn't mean that that anyone necessarily can do it. Anyone can learn it over time. Yeah. But just doesn't mean they can just hop in and do it. It needs to have, put some respect on its name. So I've seen the most tension when it tries to be forced just to stay in IT. That's just where I see the most tension throughout the company.
So just to backtrack on Camping World for a second. So again, just for context for listeners, so large enterprise retail business, Fortune 500 company, I believe, is that right? Yeah, about 14,000 employees, huge, right? So just high level footprint with Salesforce. What does that look like in terms of product, sales cloud, service cloud? How many users are we talking?
Yeah, we're about 4,000 users. In my purview, I've got sales and service, and then we've got some really fun, future looking toys to play with that we're implementing that are all the rage right now. And we also have Commerce Cloud and Marketing Cloud. Those are not in my purview, but we partner very closely. So we've got a very large footprint that is growing. And that's one thing I love about Camping World, is that they really are making the investment to leverage and get the full ROI out of the platform, instead of just, cutting back on people and saying, make it work.
Yeah, I think we talk about that a lot in these podcasts, is the notion of be all in or not at all, right? If you don't sit on the fence. If you're going to invest in something, do it properly. Don't skimp and save. Do that in other areas. But when it comes to Salesforce, if you truly want ROI, you have to be all in.
Exactly. I actually was over the weekend speaking with one of the client services directors at Salesforce, the client partner. His name's Justin, and he and I were talking about staffing because that's what he does. And he had a really great analogy that I told him I was going to take over and run with. And he was like, buying Salesforce is like buying a plane. And you don't just have you have a whole team that services and flies and maintains this plane, right? You don't have your flight attendant flying the plane, maintaining the plane, air traffic controlling the plane. Like, it takes a team, right? And you want a very highly trained team flying and maintaining, and fixing your plane. And so I really loved that, because I was been trying to, I love analogies. I'm trying to figure out an analogy of a way to why it matters to invest in your people that run your platform. And it's because you're buying a plane, and it is a very great plane, and it will take you literally anywhere you want to go. But your flight crew and your ground crew have to know what they're doing. They have to be there. They have to be there to support you. And once you're fully maintained and supported, there's nowhere you can't go.
Mm-hmm. And you probably don't want a pilot checking the engine or vice versa, right? A mechanic flying the plane.
So when you don't have the right kind of team, you've got a developer, asking your business what they need, you've got your ground crew trying to fly your plane, and it's just not going to work. You need the right skill sets in the right jobs.
Agreed, 100%. So let's talk a little bit about that, Abby. So 8 weeks in, and something that you've talked about throughout your career, that initial kind of assessing the lay of the land. How do you, inheriting scenarios where you're already using Salesforce, it's already there, it's staying there for the foreseeable, indefinitely. How do you assess, plan, prepare, and work out how many people you need, what type of skill sets should be in the org? Talk us through your kind of methodology and thought process for that.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you what I did in my first 8 weeks at Camping World was, so again, I had joined and I realized I have a team of 8, and I'm like, well, that sounds like a lot. So I met individually with each one. I set one-on-one time and met for an hour with each person. And I really asked them what their background was, what their interests are, what are they doing today that they wish, that they like, what they don't like, what they want, where they want to grow. Because my big thing too is investing in people and putting people where they want to be, because we're generally better at where we're good at what we're interested in. So I really got to know the background of everyone on my team, so that when it came time to kind of figure out how to rearrange people, I could align people with what they are interested in, and assess their skills through talking to them. So that was the first thing I did, was met with my team, kind of finding the four corners of trying to put a tent together. Is you got to lay everything out and figure out where all your tools are, right? And so then I flew and I visited a lot of our headquarters. We have a couple different hubs, and listened. I just shadowed my project manager and just listened to the pain points, listened to, what's going on. I really delved deep into my business analyst skills of just listening for the unmet need. It's they're going to talk a lot. They don't necessarily know what they need, but once you do this enough, you can listen, and you hear that unspoken need, and you can get in front of it. And so I really understood that, okay, we had one long intake funnel when I joined. The entire team was just focused on multiple lines of business competing with each other for priority, which in business, that's not really going to work when you have a multifaceted business. They're each equally important. They need to compete within themselves for their own priorities, but competing against each other doesn't make sense, which slows down the delivery cycle, which is why some business units would defect and go find their own solution, right? So I realized, I was like, okay, speed to market is the biggest problem here. So even though I've got a bunch of hands, they're all kind of diving into the same funnel, and I need to diversify that. Each major line of business needs its own delivery funnel. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I started mapping out this, kind of in a lucid chart Figma situation of where can I put the people that I have now aligned with their skill sets of what they like to do and where their background is. And then, okay, if I was to have these, where else do I need to fortify? And so Camping World is so large that we've got two kind of really large like ways I can divvy this up. There's 12 different business units, kind of 6 over here and 6 over here. So I need 2 program managers. So I have 2 program managers, and under them, I'm like, I need developers and admins. But one thing I really noticed is, okay, my team was great. Even though we had a slower delivery cycle, we were doing great work. However, the rollouts are where we were really struggling. We had to roll some things back because things weren't fully tested, and I've seen this in other companies too. Camping World is not unique here. I realized the change management was nil, was non-existent. And so that is my bread and butter, because I come from a business background as an accidental admin. I realized I could have the most beautifully architected system in the world, but if my users don't know how to use it, what does it matter? It's not going to get used. Adoption is going to tank. People are going to defect, and management is not going to be happy. They're not getting their ROI. So I was like, okay, we really have to have change management here. And that is a person, not the business, not, Susie from accounting rolling this out to everybody because she knows what she knows, but somebody who is really speaks both languages, the business and Salesforce, and they know how to do that translation. Again, those certain skill sets. I needed a very specific pilot to fly this plane, right? So really, I was pushing hard on that. We need change management. And knowing that we need to bring change management in the beginning of a project, not the end. If you're waiting till the end of a project to bring change management in, it's already too late. So that became my hiring plan. It was okay, and this is how I'm going to be successful. And I have a DevOps person, and that's all they do. They're now, then another layer of what I did is I took my more senior people on my team and I made them the Salesforce Center of Excellence. I was like, this team sets the rules for how everything's going to happen, policy and procedure wise, that everybody's going to align to. And that I'm not a big, huge policy and procedure person. However, I know that when you don't do A, B, and C, stuff goes off the rails really quick. So let's maybe not have that happen. So let's back into how do we prevent this from going off the rails with a Salesforce COE. And I even met with Salesforce to get their kind of perspective on how they recommend, teams and large enterprise, organizations function. And I kind of took their approach and I kind of made it my own, because it was okay, this is a great starting point, but what's it need to look like for Camping World? And that's where, I really made sure every task has an owner. So DevOps has an owner. Change management, UAT, lives with our change management person, gets sign off. Because one thing I was noticing was we were having to roll things back because we thought we had it, right? And the business was like, yeah, sure. And then we go live and somebody down the line didn't get the memo. And they're like, wait, this messes my whole thing up. We have to roll the whole thing back. And so while we did amazing work, it was looking like we didn't because nobody actually owned UAT. And so my change management person is going to own it, going to document it, is going to project manage and really own that end to end. And we're hopefully going to get some tools that will help out with that. But again, change management is such a huge, very, very under, what's the word I'm looking for? Under, not there's a word for it and it's totally I'm blanking on it right now, but it's very underappreciated for sure. And it's you typically, just like discovery, it's kind of the first thing that gets cut when you engage with an SI. SI is like, oh well, let's do change management, and companies like, nah, we got it, we'll get it to Becky and she'll do it. Becky's not gonna do it. She doesn't. If they have a day job, they're not going to do it. They don't have the bandwidth. And so really just saying, oh, well, we're going to save that money and we'll just make our current team do it. That's putting your entire project and therefore your very expensive plane at risk, right? Because you want it to go smoothly, and humans are humans. And when they get burned, they're going to be a little cautious the next time, right? So you only have so much trust with your users that you can kind of play with.
I know Maz has a question, but I think change management is often seen as the unsexy part of an implementation, right? It's we want to build, we want to code, we want to develop, we want to do the fun stuff, but change management is often hard work, and it's not for the faint-hearted. So I think that is partly the reason why it kind of gets tossed aside. Maz, you got a question on team structure?
Yeah, a couple. So I'll make this a multi-part question, make it easier for you. So one, which are the big problem for a lot of organizations, is how do you future-proof your team? Meaning, right, you're very agile, you get requirements, it's very project-oriented, right? I'm going to bang out the business needs, or maybe you're setting up 30-day, 90-day plans. But then, comes the next quarter, business is changing, you're coming up with new ideas that you want to implement, and maybe that impacts your team structure. And obviously, you don't want to let people go because you just invested in them, not to mention the impact on morale. Right. So the one is, how do you future-proof your team, particularly when deciding on this kind of team structure? And the second one is, so I'm a very strong opponent of UAT. I'm like, you have to do UAT. So where you're saying that they don't have time, like, that's not an acceptable answer, is generally my response. That's just not an acceptable answer. And what I say is, I'll test a spec. I'll have my UAT testers, like machines, they will test the spec and it will work to spec, but I cannot test to intent, right? If you intended it to do X and that's not what the spec says, it's not going to do what you intended. And I don't have any documentation of intent. And it's only you who really know the intent, because unfortunately humans just aren't perfect communicators. Even when you think you agree and you say that you agree, and right, it just the nature of human communication. So I guess that's kind of the two questions, right? UAT, testing for intent, and future proofing your team.
Yeah, great questions. And future proofing, so it's a multifaceted process of what I'm doing, because I've told my team, it's not just Camping World, it's anywhere, right? Layoffs are a thing, right? And it can happen at any moment. So the best future proofing I can do for me is, number one, stay as close to revenue as possible, meaning, keep the people who make the revenue happy. But also, if I can't do that, what I really have seen done before and am growing out here is feature reporting. So building into every feature that we release some way to show how it's being used, that it's being used, adoption built into our features. How many times are they clicking this button? When they click a button, go create a feature, enhancement, or a feature, log, basically report on feature usage. And so then again, so we can report on feature usage, that if it's low, my change management person can jump in front of it and go get in front and be like, people need to be trained. We need to follow up on this. What isn't working? We need to optimize and really, grow the feature or change the feature depending on, we released it, but is it still working, right? Is it still working for the business? Because we talked about the business zigs and zags. Maybe they zigged and we didn't know. We now need to zig with them. And so future-proofing helps from that standpoint, but also understanding when you're hiring. So we talked about, like, when do you bring on an SI? When do you bring, in-house? And I think there's a place for all of them, because the perks of an SI is, they can spin up really quickly, right? You don't need to hire necessarily. You don't have to interview. Interviews take a long time. Onboarding takes a long time. So I'm doing a hybrid approach here where I'm bringing on kind of a staff aug model of professional services to get spun up people who know what they're doing, with the intent of, I'm going to be hiring while they're working, and figuring out also, if I'm not sure I want to hire for this role, bringing a bunch of, SI partners in to do work, figure out what roles I need to put a pin in, and be like, actually, no, I need to hire for that role. This is working really well. I need to hire for this role. And kind of just watching how everything, kind of coalesces of, this actually is working really well as a contract to hire as a staff aug. We're going to leave that alone. This one, actually, no, we need to kind of make this a little bit more extensible. It need to work with some other departments. We really need to own this tribal knowledge. So we're going to bring that one in-house. But the beauty of an SI or recruiting partner is they can help fill that role while you're looking to hire. So, SIs are great for, I've got this major initiative that I need to stand up, but I don't need this entire huge team to maintain it. I need a subset of that team to maintain it. So looking around the corner, it's like, okay, it's going to be a massive, big thing to implement, but it will need maintenance. What kind of maintenance might it need? And how can I, support that, going forward? Is it a staff aug? Is it, bring one person on and hire? Again, every business has to answer these questions for themselves, but they need to ask themselves these questions. We've got you don't want to hire for this big implementation and then have to let people go. It's like, what are these people going to do post implementation, right? If you can't answer that, that's where it's like, okay, maybe we bring in a partner. And I've got some caveats on before you bring a partner in what to do. But that's definitely, the questions that you need to be asking is, what are they going to do after this implementation?
What are some of those caveats on a partner? You set yourself up for that question. So what are some of the things you need to do before you decide, you think you're ready for a partner, but what are some of those things you need to do and implement as a leader to make sure that, it's a positive experience for both the company and the SI?
Yeah. Couple of things from the business side is, ask yourself, okay, do we have our business processes mapped out? Are they clean? Are they easily handoffable? If the answer is no, do you want to do that in-house, or do you want to pay the SI to do that for you? The SI will do that for you. It costs extra. And that's where most companies are like, no, we don't need it. But yes, you do. You need it done, whether you do it or you hire and contract that out. But that is going to make for just a much more clean, simple, straightforward, less 3 a.m. panics and, at implementation day when you go live, if you already have that done. So pre-work is make sure you know your business processes, and also identify who your super users or your roles and responsibilities internally are going to be. Who's going to run with this? Who's going to own this? You do need somebody from your side to kind of project manage, whether that's a director of Salesforce to interface between the two, an admin. Somebody needs to own the relationship between because the SI is just going to, who do they go to when they have questions? If they're going to every single person, like that can get confusing because they're getting different answers. So you really need kind of an air traffic control. Like somebody's got to own that, because again, this isn't just some quick and easy weekend spin up thing. Like this is typically a large initiative. So you've got an airport full of planes. Who's going to direct this, right? Who's going to make sure the planes don't crash into each other? So definitely doing, ensuring that your discovery work is done somehow, or knowingly hire that out, but do not skimp on it on either side. It's got to be done. And then again, how is this going to roll out? Are you going to have the SI roll this out? Again, you still need somebody internally to kind of manage, making sure the right people are in the room. The SI doesn't know that, we need 3 different people from 3 different departments. We need somebody who knows the internal landscape that can say, we need to make sure these people are in the right room at the same time. Because if you talk to one, but without the other, you get silos, you get wires crossed, and you get mixed messages, and you get bad builds.
Do you think, therefore, in that case, in an ideal world, requirement gathering should be an internal business activity prior to onboarding an SI? In an ideal world?
I mean, I would think so. Why are you buying Salesforce in the first place, right? If you don't know what your requirements are. I mean, I think if you aren't sure how to do it, that's where you can partner with your SI to help. They've got methodologies, they've got tools, they know they've done this before, but trusting in that, knowing enough to know that you don't know is huge. And so if you can do it on your own, great. You'll save a lot of SI money doing it that way. But also some businesses just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so it's okay, but know that it still does need to be done. And in investing in both that and change management will just skyrocket your ROI of your implementation, because the sexy things, you can go straight to build and build and build and push it out with an email. and it's going to fail. And then you're going to think, oh my gosh, I've just got, wasted all this money and nobody's using it because it wasn't done end to end and thoughtfully. You need to really have a strategy of, how are we going to intake and how are we going to implement?
You've spent time with an SI, a well-known SI in the past. Being customer side, what do you look for typically when selecting a SI? Any common themes? Is it their reputation within doing projects within a certain industry, a certain cloud, a certain size of business? What are sort of the qualifying factors that you take into account when you've decided you're having an SI, but how do you then choose out the 2,000, 3,000 SIs that are out there?
Yeah. Well, this is where networking comes in very handy. Usually if you're in the networking, ecosphere, you can, hey, you hear the reputations, right? But outside of that, it would be customer stories. Exactly what clouds, what projects have you worked on for other clients? Like, okay, I've got a data cloud implementation. I might not necessarily go with a financial services, SI. I want somebody who's done that before. But if I definitely need, if I'm a financial services firm, I want to go with a financial services, SI, because Salesforce used to be where, any SI could kind of implement anything. It used to be small, but now it's so big that you kind of have to niche or die, right? You can't be the jack of all Salesforce trades anymore unless you're huge and you've subsector. But you're like your smaller boutiques, like they've got a niche, like figure out what their niche is and talk to, either their clients or network, ask your network of, hey, what do you think? But that reputation is really, really important. The Ohana is very tight knit and very small in a good way. And so you can find, the good ones, they're out there. But that's what I, really look for is, again, what's my project and who's done that and what are their customer stories around that?
So when dealing with an SI, because you've been on both sides, so I guess you kind of understand the SI, let's say, speak or culture, which I'm sure is very different than the client side. Any tips for like negotiating a contract with an SI or working with an SI that you think would be helpful to some of our listeners?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. So, I mean, just like Salesforce is going to sell you whatever you want to buy, like SIs are going to try to sell lots of services. So that's where that internal work comes in really handy, knowing your own gaps before you get there. Because if you don't know what your gaps are, they're going to try to sell you stuff. And to kind of fend off on that, you might turn down everything without realizing that actually, no, you do need some things. So never, ever, ever skip on discovery and change management, whether you do it in-house or you have an SI, but they may, partner with them, tell them what your goals are, tell them what your challenges are, really partner with an SI because they, the good ones really want to be your partner, not just for this project, but for a long term. So if they're really just hammering you on this one project, like it's a little bit of a red flag for me because I want to build a relationship, right? Because I'm going to have more projects and I want to know where I can go to get those projects fulfilled. So, there are some fly-by-nights out there that, are just worried about like, what's the next thing before you're even done with the current thing. And it's like, let's get this ironed out, build a relationship with me, right? Build a relationship with your SI because this is a relationship business. I mean, we are CRM, right? So really, be weary of, the ones that, just want to kind of like sell you stuff and not necessarily build a relationship.
Any concern that sometimes an SI that's, let's say, hyper-focused on Salesforce tries to hit everything with the Salesforce hammer?
I mean, yeah, then you can extract that to anything that wants to,
Yeah.
one broad stroke for everything, right? There are definitely, I mean, I lean towards more in Salesforce than not, but there are things that, Salesforce might not be the best fit. And that's, again, you got to make those calls for yourself. But, the ones that are just like, oh, it can do every single thing and it's super easy. Like you've got that triangle, right? Good, fast, and cheap. And you get to like, if it's like, we get all three, red flag. Like that's a red flag, because it's either going to be really good and fast, but it's not going to be cheap. You're going to pay for it, but it's going to be really good and really fast. Or, you got to give one up. Right. So the ones that are just like, oh, it's going to be good, fast, and cheap. And it's like, oh, it's going to cost you on the back end somehow.
We've all interacted heavily with SIs, obviously working with them, for them, etc. I think often SIs have a tough job. I think it's easy to blame an SI who are on a project when the project doesn't work out well. And there are those projects that don't go as successfully as everyone had imagined. But I don't see the customer always taking accountability for their part in that process, right? It's like a marriage, right? Usually it's not just one person's fault. There's element of truth on both sides, right? So what does a customer need to do to show up and do their part within that partnership? You said it's a relationship and it goes both ways. So we talked briefly about how a customer could be ready for that journey, doing requirement gathering, having UA testers on hand, or whatever it might be, right? But what are some of the other non-negotiables from your end in terms of, we've selected an SI, this is how we're going to hold ourselves accountable internally? What are some of those items?
Yeah, which is a great point. And I'm going to hit kind of back on what we just said, but it is making sure people on your team, on your side, have the bandwidth to devote to this project. Because if people are already working 40 hours a week and you're layering an implementation on top of them, like it's like there's not enough time in the day for people to focus, right? So setting everyone up for success on you're going to be spending 20 hours a week with this implementation team. We need to take 20 hours a week worth of work off and find other places for it to go, or making some other kind of concession, because again, everybody is busy with their day job, right? And if this is an afterthought, it's going to feel like an afterthought. So if you just prioritized with the team and they're able to give their time and attention to it, to not be double, multitasking in meetings where they're in requirements meetings, but they're taking care of fires over here and they're not really paying attention, and they just missed something that actually was really important, like setting your team up for success and making sure they have the bandwidth dedicated to being present and being there in the meetings. Because if they're doing two different things and the SI does not know any better, so if they're like, yeah, sure, that sounds good, but they weren't really listening, the SI is going to take that as like you said, and they don't know what they don't know. Only you know your business. And so you've got to make sure that those people are able to dedicate time and show up. That's why on every project kickoff call, you'll see roles and responsibilities from each side. They need you to be there, not just in the meeting where your face is like, your bubble's there. You need to be there and bring your thoughts and bring your concerns and bring your questions and really, really partner. So making sure your team has the bandwidth to dedicate this, because this is not just a side gig. Mm-hmm. This is, yes, it's a concurrent project you have going on, but it takes time and attention, and Salesforce is like a toddler. It'll wander off if you don't pay attention to it. So this, the project could go off the rails if it's not, you need to have focus on it. So really just the bandwidth, making sure your team has bandwidth to take this on.
We talked a little bit about things you can do to help an SI to maximize that relationship, mm-hmm. to save money, to devote more time or resource over to the SI. Hypothetical scenario, you've picked an SI, you've done the project, right? How do you go about knowing when to ramp up or ramp down with SI support in general, right? Because a business like Camping World, you're going to have so many projects and initiatives, so many partners, probably 3, 4, 5, 6 partners, bunch of contractors, bunch of, in-house talent. And you can't rely on a partner indefinitely, because there are negatives to that, which we don't necessarily need to go into, but there are a few: cost, etc., being overly reliant, and so on. when do you know when to ramp up and down? Are there any key indicators that typically you're like, okay, we've gone live, now we need to start to reduce? Or is it even prior to that? Like it's like phase 3, for example, where you start to think, okay, if I haven't got the resources in-house, this is going to be an issue.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And I think it's thinking about things in phases, right? We've got the discovery phase. What do we need for that? But the people we need in discovery phase aren't necessarily the same people we need for the build phase. So we can ramp up the build phase as we're ramping down the discovery phase, keeping some overlap, because you don't want to just start and stop over with the, tribal knowledge is a thing. And having, figuring out who is going to persist the entire project, and then who can come and go based on their skill sets. And then this is really important at project when you're mapping out the project is, okay, at what point, okay, development's done. We're just doing rollout and hypercare. So we don't need a team of developers on staff for hypercare. We need maybe one and a change manager and maybe a project manager, right? So really thinking about each phase as a set of activities. Who's going to own those activities? Every activity needs to have some owner, because an activity without an owner doesn't get done. So that's why change management needs an owner. UAT needs a project manager for, we really need hypercare. Who are we going to go to if something's on fire? So we need that person to stay on. So really just taking a list of all the activities that are going to need to be done and making sure each one has an owner and those roles and responsibilities. And so that also wires don't get crossed. You have a streamlined kind of channels of communication. And that way, okay, we've got our partner over here. We didn't foresee, we actually need a little bit more support here. We need to bring that on and staying in flux and in communication with your SI partner as well throughout the entire thing. It's not a set it and forget it. It's art, not science.
Awesome. So kind of changing topics a little bit. So you're running Salesforce org, you're taking over Salesforce org. Obviously you need certain skills or tools, right, to do this right. And there's kind of a couple of buckets, right? You have your hard technical skills, you have your more softer people skills, and then you have your business industry knowledge, right? I know you've said you have done Salesforce development, so like I don't know how much camping experience or RV experience you've had prior to this role, right? So how important has those things? Is there any skill that you thought like maybe coming to the role would have been really great if I had that coming in? Do you just kind of wing it, right? So what do you think is that like right mix? So to give this a more practical question, someone who's up and coming in their career, maybe they're doing really well as an individual contributor, where do they focus their learning in that way from, let's say, maybe the softer skills or the harder skills to get to that next level or to really be good at that next level?
My first answer is to go with what you're really interested in. Because if you're not interested in working with the business and you want to develop those more technical skills, then don't dive into the, softer people skills yet. Follow your strengths. But to get to the next level, you are going to have to develop those softer people skills in reading people and translating. That's the biggest thing. I call myself a human ETL, and it's funny, but it's also true. I know how to speak different languages within the English language. I can speak developer, I can speak admin, I can speak C-level, I can speak business. And it's really taking what does this person that I'm talking to need to know about what's going on. So as a developer, and you're talking to the business, they don't need to know what the JSON looks like. They don't need to know what the backend looks like, the custom metadata. They don't care. They don't need to know. They need to know what's in it for me. How is this going to work going forward? What do I need to know about rolling out so that I can either tell my team or like what's changed, right? C-suite needs to know what's the ROI, what's the feature adoption, what's the status on this project. They need to know different things, right? So being able to understand what the audience needs and communicating that is the key to getting to any next level, is reading the room and figuring out who needs to know what, because I need to talk to my developers and we need to fix this code. This JSON's not the way it should be, or right? You need to come out your code different. But nobody else cares about that. But I and the developers do. I'm not saying it's not important. It's just, it's important to the developers in this scenario, but it's not important to the C-suite. They do need to know that we had to refactor some code and it's going to push us a sprint. That they care about. They don't care about why. They need to know the impact, right? So again, just tailoring your message to your audience. Your business doesn't care, again, about the JSON, but they do need to know, hey, actually, we're not going to roll out for another sprint as well. So we need to get, involve change management and all the downstream implications of that decision.
Right. So getting back to, let's say, the industry knowledge, right? How much of that do you really have to know? I'll give you an example. If I'm in retail, let's say, or wholesaling, right? Often I'm thinking in terms of product lines, SKUs, inventory, and let's say time to market, right? Or supply chain stuff. But it's like a massive business, and it's heavily focused usually on ERP and accounting and raw numbers and sales. And when you get to the CRM world, it's very different, right? It's more who's the decision maker, how do I get to the decision maker, how do I acquire my leads, how do I validate my leads, what does the sales cycle look like, right? So how do you kind of learn that stuff? And particularly, when often, particularly in sales, people switch industries, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough nut to crack, because you can see how the accounting stuff is very transferable from industry to industry, where the whole relationship side is not necessarily. Any tips and advice, or how you've done that, or is it just natural, I guess, to some people?
I will say for me, it is natural. However, when I kind of examine why it's natural, is I kind of start from the outside in. What's our bigger why? Like, why does this company exist? How do they make money? Right. Then I kind of, okay, why do we make money? What do? We sell RVs. Okay. Within that, how do we sell RVs? Okay, we sell new RVs, we acquire used RVs, we sell those. So then it's just kind of chunking down, the bigger why into like a little bit more of how. Okay, this department works to this North Star. This is what they do. I always find, what's our North Star? What's our overarching North Star, right? Because then every decision we make maps to that North Star. And when I'm learning a process, I tell a story in my head of, okay, we take it in. We need to like inspect the RV if we're going to buy it, right? Because that makes sense. We need to know what we're buying. So I really tell a story about what we do that ties to how we do it, which also then helps me, hey, I know that we're trying to get here and we do ABC, but have we ever thought doing CBA to help us wrap technology around that? And so maybe changing some things up. And if there's a reason we do it that way, that's fine, but help me understand what that reason is. And that's how I learn the business, is just, again, knowing the full end-to-end first off, like what's the point and why we're here? And then just everything underneath it is nuance of how we achieve that goal.
Okay, so again, going just back to practicality, it sounds like your preferred method, and maybe if I'm wrong, is conversational. I talk to the business users, I talk to the people on the ground. Do you feel, or have you tried shadowing? Like,
oh yeah,
that's another
definitely. I love shadowing, conversation and shadowing. That's when I, first joined Camping World, and figuring out like what are our blocks to, being able to support the entire business with 8 people was shadowing. I shadowed my project manager, and we went and shadowed other departments. Shadowing is one of my favorite ways to learn. And I make sure that if I have established Salesforce users, I find my like strongest user or my highest salesperson, and my lowest or my weakest user or my like lowest salesperson, because I want to know what the best of the best are doing and what the not great people are doing, so that I can bridge the gap of like, what from this person do I need to teach this person, or what challenges are this person see that can help everyone. So I really like to shadow. I talk to people. I like to sit in on meetings and just listen of like, what are we trying to achieve, right? Because if I can get that overarching, what are we trying to achieve story, I can help map, backtrack a roadmap to get there.
How much? Answer your question, Matt. I think I answered your question.
I was just gonna say a stupid anecdotal story. So I have a problem shadowing, because I'm very technical, detail oriented, and I'm like a 5 whys person. I got to get to the real why, right? The 5 whys deep, and I always end up insulting the person because they think that I'm questioning how they're doing it.
Okay, I have a
Like,
tip on
are you
that.
doing that right? Why aren't you doing it like this? And they do not like it.
The 5 whys, yes, I always caution people because why is a defensive question. It will make anybody defensive. Even my daughter sometimes when she's like, why, mom? And I'm like, whoa, 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 who are you to question me? I'm like, oh, wait, she's just trying to understand. So I coach people, instead of asking why, you ask what and how questions, or help me understand why. Do not just say why, because yes, people do not like it. And they will be like, please leave. Like, don't question me. But you can ask, what about this is important, or what are you doing that helps achieve this, XYZ, or, how do you do da, 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 da. And so what and how questions will get to your why. But if you ask a why question, you're probably gonna piss somebody off.
Good advice. And I
It
can't
took me
imagine
50
why.
years to learn it. Okay,
I can't imagine why anyone would think that about you, Maz. So I have a question for you around the topic, and I'm curious. I'm not saying it's a factor or not. I'll let you answer it. But how much would you say your consulting experience, right? I guess before I ask this question, so you did about 8 years of your Salesforce career in-house before your Salesforce consulting took place, and then afterwards you've done another 3 years-ish, right? So how much do you think your time and experience with an SI, with a consulting company, has helped you be effective in those areas we've just talked about assessing the lay of the land and working out what's important to a customer, what do they focus on, what is their product, et cetera, et cetera? Do you think, were you already naturally good at that prior to consulting? If so, like, let's say, what would you rate yourself out of 10? And how much did that improve being an SI? Again, score out of 10 to present day.
Oh, good question. I think before I had done several different places of in-house, so I was starting to get it of like, okay, I can abstract on a theme and like, this is how different companies work. But I will say I would not be where I am today without my consulting experience. It changed the game. So if I'm a 10 out of 10 because of it, I'm not saying I am, I'm saying if I am, because of the consulting experience, I was probably like a 6 before, like 5, 6. Like I was starting to get there, but the consulting experience, because there was so rapid fire, there were so many projects in a short amount of time. And the beauty of working with consulting is I'm generally surrounded by brilliance, like so many smart people that I was working with. Not that I'm not in-house, I am, but there were so many more of that specific type of brain that, business is smart at business things, but I was surrounded by like Salesforce, geniuses, and like implementation and data architects, and that go and, set up shop and do this for other companies. So I was so exposed to so much talent and information, for a long time, and I got to see what worked at scale and what didn't work at scale, and learn from other people's mistakes and other people's best practices that in-house took just a little bit longer to put together because it wasn't so rapid fire. So I would recommend everybody have some consulting experience in the Salesforce industry, because you just get to see so many different things that you're like, oh, I've seen this before. We've done this before. This is really cool. Like we could do this here, and just transfer that knowledge in ways that you just wouldn't otherwise be exposed to.
That's solid advice. I think it's advice that I always think in-house you get more in depth. Consulting, you get more variety, right? More width. Yeah. Thanks for helping me out. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, consulting you get, but that's why I love in-house now, is because I want to go deep. But I have that breadth experience, so I get to bring both to this table, and that's really exciting. But yeah, the consulting and the breadth of experience is phenomenal.
Okay, so we're just about at time. So let's close with this. I know you're just getting started, so this is an odd question, but we always end with this question. So what's next for you and Camping World, the Salesforce space? What are you most excited about? It's coming up.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Not sure how much I can talk about, but we just closed a deal on getting all the fun new toys, and we get to implement them. I get to play with things that are new and exciting and really going to be transformative for the face of the business. So just watch. It's going to be super fun.
Any agent force on the list for
Yes.
you?
Yes, we actually have an Agent Force pilot working on right now. We just kicked it off a couple weeks ago, and like I said, it's gonna transform the face of the business, and I'm so excited about it.
What about events wise for next year? I know you're very active in the space. So any events you already registered for and signed up to?
I haven't, but I want to put in to speak. I definitely want to do Tahoe Dreaming because it's the last year of Tahoe Dreaming tier. Super sad. But definitely Texas Dreaming. That's that's where I got my start. So I have mad love for that. Probably Northeast Dreaming. Love Northeast Dreaming. And maybe a couple others. I'm just going to put a couple of talks together and submit and see who bites.
Any events for the retail space, obviously, that are like more nuanced and niche for that general industry that you've come across?
Well, Camping World holds its own events. They do like Camping World like tours, which is pretty cool, and I'm hoping I get to go to one of those. But not in the Salesforce retail space that I'm aware of.
You fit nicely with the whole Salesforce camping theme.
I know. I've got marketing plans. I'm like, Benioff, call me.
Good. Any other general advice for our listeners on any of the areas we've covered today?
Oh, wow. Yes. How much time do we have? Just, again, asking better questions, really diving deep, and establishing that North Star. Why are you doing what you're doing? Understanding that will take you very, very far.
Amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Abi, for your input. And that concludes today's session. So thank you, listeners, for joining us and listening to this episode. If you liked what you hear, please continue to download and subscribe to the CRM Success Show, where we feature more amazing guests like Abi. Once again, Abi, thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much for having me.